Hello, everyone, and welcome to Mistakes Were Made. This is a channel that I created to document my family's progress with debt reduction and eventual elimination. Today, we are going to do a bit of an update on our debt confession video. We are in April. As you can see, we're going to be talking about information as of April 4th. That is when I pulled the data for our current stuff that's on here. This timeline is essentially 6 months from the date that my partner and I started down this debt and budgeting, etc. path. We started the channel in October, so figured that this would be a good time to take a look at where we started, where we are now, and maybe touch on a little bit of what we're kind of seeing or planning for the future. So I definitely recommend that you watch our debt confession video. It gives a pretty good idea of where we started with this. We really had no idea what we were doing, at least not to an extent that it was helpful. I mean, I've always known that a budget is a good thing to have and things like that, but how to implement something, especially when you're kind of in crisis mode, which is where we were, and to an extent still are now. Back in October, we weren't prepared. We were not prepared for the situation that came up. And so it was a little bit of a struggle. It was definitely a learning curve, and I do feel that we have made great strides. But I'm not going to go into much more detail about where we were and why we were there in October. Suffice to say, the company that I currently work for filed for bankruptcy last year in August. At that point, around 30,000 people lost their jobs. There was a small group of folks that were kept on to kind of help usher the company through the bankruptcy process. My team was one of those that stayed mostly intact. And as of today, we still have people, including myself, from my team working. No real understanding at that time how long we would be working. And so it definitely made for a very stressful situation because, as I said, we were not prepared to handle the loss of one of our incomes. It wasn't anything we really thought would happen, which to me is understandable, but it's also short-sighted. You just never know. So it could have been an accident that took out one of our incomes rather than the company closing. So we were not being as diligent and as smart with our money as we could have been from the get-go. And so we needed to catch up really quickly and come up with a plan and figure out how we were going to weather this situation for however long it lasted, and then what kind of plan we were going to make for the future. So with that in mind, let's see where we started, where we are now, and what kind of difference we are seeing for each of our debt items. So these will be the credit cards and the loan with my mom. The first one we have is Amazon. So when we started out, our Amazon credit card was at $5,133.07. Currently, it is at zero, but it is at zero because we did a balance transfer to a 0% promo card. At the time, between October and the time we did the transfer, we did pay $1,016.04 towards that debt. Now, if you take that amount and you subtract it from the 5133, it does not add up to the amount that we did the balance transfer for, and that is because the Amazon card did have interest on it. So the payments that we were making were not effective as a whole. If we made a $100 payment and there's a $30 interest rate or interest fee, then only $70 is going to bring the debt down. So that number over here is the actual amount that we paid towards the card, but not necessarily how much the debt was reduced before we did the balance transfer. Next is Bank of America. Now this card had debt on it because previous to this situation, we actually initiated 2 balance transfers. One we did back in, oh gosh, I don't even remember. It wasn't even last year. I think it was the year before, because the date that that particular promo was going to expire was February of this year. And then we had another one that was set to expire in September of this year. And I want to say we did the transfer on that maybe right around the time of the bankruptcy announcement, maybe the month before. I can't remember, but suffice to say that amount was at 0%. So any payments we made were payments in full, fully affected the debt. As you can see, it is at 0 and we have paid it off. So that is a debt that is no longer part of our worries. And so that's a reduction of $12,160. The next item on the list is Citi. And this is a card that we did purposely open after the bankruptcy information in an effort to reduce some of our credit card debt and to get some of our credit card debt off of interest rate payments. The debt at the time when we first put it together was $7,725. That's the amount that we did a transfer for. And currently we are at $6,225, or a reduction of $1,500. Discover, we were in October, we had $10,506.30. At this time, our debt is at $9,944.43, with a reduction amount of $561.87. Now, we'll be coming back to that because that does have asterisks. This currently is the only card we have right now that does have interest. The mom loan was for $2,999. That was what was left at the time that we started this process. That is now at 0. It is 100% paid off for a reduction of $2,999. This ugly handwriting one is the Reflect card. This is the card where the balance transfer for Amazon and for the next credit card went to. The total ended up being $13,639.45, and that does include the balance transfer fee that we were charged to do this process. We are currently at $13,120 for a reduction of $519.50. We opened that card in February, so that's not quite a couple of months of payments so far. The next one is US Bank. We started with $8,965.45. It is now at a 0 balance, but that is due to the balance transfer that I mentioned previously. Up to that point, we had paid $1,162.34, but again, that is not reflective of the amount that we ended up transferring because it was an interest account, so not the entirety of the $1,162 did not reduce our debt by that same amount. I believe the balance transfer that we did for the US Bank was like $8,500. So if we look at this, we get these totals. We have $48,138.32 as the total here. And I'll slide this. There's an asterisk next to all of these, because when we're doing this total, the only amount of this reflect that I've added in here is the $649.50 balance transfer fee. The reason I did that is if I were to include the entirety of this cost or this debt, then I would be doubling up on the debts from Amazon and US Bank, because that is what makes up the bulk of that amount. Currently, our debt is $29,289.43, which is a reduction of $19,918.75. Now again, we've got our asterisks here. And the reason why I call this out is because while this is how much it appears we have reduced this debt, we have actually paid $1,683.77 towards the Discover card. But again, because it does have interest, the payments that we make only go so far. And I want to say, when I was looking at it over the last 6 months, we have been charged $1,138 in interest. So, it's really ugly to see, just how much having interest accrue on a credit card can affect your ability to pay it down. And so it's one of those things where the answer is you need to either not use credit cards at all, or if you are able to use them wisely, make sure you are paying them off 100% every single month. Because if it's got interest, and most of them will, unless you're doing some kind of balance transfer thing for a period of time, that interest is going to just wreck you. So if we take into account the actual amount that we've paid towards the Discover debt, then the total debt reduction would be $21,602.52. We have to go with this because, that's how much we still have in debt, no matter how much we have actually paid towards it. If it gets mitigated by interest, it gets mitigated by interest. So this is what we still owe. For our mortgage, at the time we had $243,828.54. It has been reduced down to $240,538.57, or a reduction of $3,289.97 over the last 6 months. Now, this does reflect the fact that as part of our ways of increasing how much money we retained from our paychecks to be able to pay debt, as well as create our job loss buffer amount of money, we did stop paying an overage on our mortgage. We reduced that pretty significantly. We didn't eliminate it completely, because I have a very averse reaction to the idea of only paying minimum payments. That's just me. Okay. So now, where are we now? What are we looking at now for the debts that we have remaining? So we've got the Citibank card, we've got Discover, we've got Reflect, and we've got our mortgage. Those are the debts that we are currently responsible for. The mins are $71 for Citi, $200 for Discover, $132 for Reflect, and our mortgage payment is $1,735.11 every month. Right now, we have budgeted $800 to go to Citi, $250 to Discover, $175 to Reflect, and as I mentioned, we're paying a little bit over. $1,750 is what we pay per month towards our mortgage. That is an overage, or we're paying extra by $729 on City, $50 on Discover, $43 on Reflect, and $14.89 on the mortgage. I wanted to stop here just for a moment to kind of talk about that, this decision. Some folks have asked, how did you make the decision on what you're going to pay down? Are you doing snowball method? All of those things. And we did, when we were trying to figure out what we were going to do, we looked into the snowball method, we looked into the avalanche method, and a lot of the common knowledge was that that's the best route to take, along with, the idea of only paying your mins and reducing your budget down to, bare bones, so you have more money to go towards debt. We absorbed some of those philosophies, but not all of them. If you've been following along, we make sure that we budget entertainment, we budget things to do, and stuff like that into our financials. We believe that you can find a balance of debt reduction and the ability to enjoy yourselves. Some people are just fine not spending any kind of money for their entertainment, and that is great. More power to them. We are a family that does not want to do that, and at this time we do have some flexibility to indulge that thought process. Additionally, that also means we do have some flexibility in our budget, that if something happens where we need to reduce the budget further than we have, we do still have some room to do that. We do have the opportunity or the ability to become more austere than where we are now. And that just works for us. So taking out doing the mins and taking out all extras from what the standard advice is, we did decide to use the snowball method, but we had a different criteria for the debts and the debt order that we were going to follow. Normally, if we had followed the standard, Dave Ramsey and all of that, we would have been focusing on the debt that we owed to my mom, because it was the smallest of the group. If we look up here at basically $3,000. Once that got paid off, we would then tackle Amazon, and then we would go to Citi, and then to US Bank, then Discover, and finally Bank of America. We did not feel like we had that as an option, mainly because this Bank of America card had 2 balance transfers on it. The first one was going to be due in February of this year, and then the second one in September of this year. So because we had expiration dates on the benefit of having 0% financing, and the penalty of missing those due dates was all of that deferred interest would then get applied onto the card and essentially bulk up our debt again. The focus ended up being Bank of America needed to be where we put most of our additional debt reduction activity when we were able to do that. And that is a big caveat there. And the reason I say that is because, again, if you've been following our channel, you are probably aware that we have not really tackled our debt. We have budgets for amounts to go towards debt inherent in the budget. $1,225 of our budget goes towards debt, paying our debt. However, because the job is going away, because we don't know when the job is going away, and this, obviously was the case back in October, November, earlier last year, and continues to be the case. Our main focus for any extra money we had was building a bank of money to use as a cushion for when the job is finally gone. And so what we had to do was determine, what is our budget? What is the budget we're going to work for? And that took some time because this was the first time that we really paid attention to our money. But eventually, I would say by November, we had a pretty set budget. There were tweaks here and there that we've done and have needed to do, but overall, we knew how much money we were going to be working under. And so if we come back down here, at the highest end, our bills are $1,268. And this does fluctuate because we do have a utility that gets charged every other month. And so, there'll be slight deviations to how much each month our bills cost. And when we say bills, we're talking utilities, insurance, our Netflix, those kinds of things. Cash envelopes, each category at the highest end is $1,278. That's how much we allot to that. And it's usually going to be $1,178 because $1,278 is when we have 5 Mondays in a month, because then our grocery allotment goes from $400 for the month to $500 for the month. So the mortgage, of course, as we outlined up here, is $1,750, and then our debt, if you add this together, is $1,225. We like to keep a $200 buffer just to be on the safe side, so our monthly budget currently is $5,721. So we typically round that up. So what does that mean post-job? If this is the budget we're following post-job, until I find another job and potentially we need to make adjustments, then we need to look and see how much of my pay goes towards that, and we needed to make some plans on saving up money so that we would have something to augment. My partner's pay for the month is $3,100 that goes into our shared account, which leaves $2,700 that I am responsible for. So we determined what we thought was a reasonable amount of time for me to find a job would be 6 months. So that means we need to be able to cover $2,700 a month for 6 months, or $16,200. Right now, we currently have $18,922 saved, which covers 7 months at $2,700 a month. Now, I will say this is not all in like cash and saved up. This includes the money that I'm anticipating for my severance, as well as the money I'm anticipating for my PTO that I've earned but haven't actually used, so it will get paid out. Obviously, if I were to find a job before this job ends, I would not get the severance amount. I'd still get the PTO. I wouldn't get the severance amount. But then again, at that point, we hopefully wouldn't need to have any of the savings, and we can then apply that to either bolstering up some of our emergency fund, as well as doing debt, or just putting it all towards debt. But bottom line, our first and foremost focus after reducing some of the stuff in our budget was getting towards this goal of $16,200. Bringing down the debt was not our number one priority. And some people may look at it and say, hey, but if you bring down the debt, then you're going to have less costs, which true, but we don't know and didn't know what kind of timeline we're working with. And the likelihood of us being able to reduce our debt by $48,000 in the assumed short period of time that we were going to be living kind of the status quo that we were used to, it just didn't make sense to spend more money beyond what we were willing to budget for that. Because, even if we were able to reduce the debt amount significantly, if we can't pay our mortgage, we can't pay for food, we can't pay, things like that, we're going to be in much more of a world of hurt. than a world of happiness because we've reduced our debt during this time. So we have taken, the slow and steady approach to bringing our debt down as best as we can. And I think a huge decision and a huge factor of that is the use of our 0% promos for the Bank of America and the Citi card. But even bigger, but on the same vein, was us making the decision to move US Bank and Amazon into a 0%. Because not only did that obviously mean as a go forward, we wouldn't be charged interest on that debt. And so the payments that we make, we're going to actually legitimately reduce the debt and only reduce the debt and not have to do that ping pong of debt goes down and then it comes back up because of the interest and down and up. But at the time, and let's see, let's write on the other side of this. So our debt, our budget has been $1,225 for months now. And that broke down to $250 for Discover, $200 for Amazon, $275 for US Bank. And what else were we doing? We were doing Bank of America, $150, and then Mom was $250. I think that adds up. 200 plus 250 plus 275 plus 150 plus 250. Nope, I'm also missing $100 for Citi. Okay. So, keeping in mind that this had interest, this had interest, this has had interest. So the payments we were making were not necessarily reducing our debt by $725. The minimum payments required for these were, higher as well. Once we took these two and transferred them, that was $475. We were able to open up the new bank card, which ended up being like $13,600 something. We talked about it just a second ago. Well, the minimum payment for that ended up being $137. And because I don't like to just pay the min, I bumped that to a $175 payment. So now, where we used to be paying for the debt for these two, $475 each month, we are now only paying $175. Or a difference of $300. So within our already budgeted amount of $1,225, we have now created $300 of flexibility. Well, because Bank of America was our focus, we were then able to snowball that amount into that payment. So we went from $150 a month now to $450 a month, and we did that in two payments, one each pay period of $225. So I really believe that the fact that we did that balance transfer was really kind of a starting point for us, because we were starting to make some additional debt progress just within our own budget. Obviously, once we got our tax refund and we were able to make some significant payments with that, that was, again, another boon. Meeting our goal of that minimum of 6 months worth of my pay coverage also was a huge leap forward, because as you know, at the end of each pay period, if we say $5,800 is the amount that we are doing per month, then roughly each pay period we're doing $2,900 worth of cost. Well, if our income is more than $2,900, which it is per pay period, then all of that extra that was previously going to get to this goal is now available for extra debt payment as well. So the timeline of this process opening up a natural snowball effect, and then us hitting this goal around that same time, and thus opening our extra unallocated amount of money each pay period to go now to debt. We, with the feedback from all of you, made it not just be just for debt, but 75% of it to go there, and then of course 25% to go to savings. Meant more debts being tackled, and then of course the taxes, having that big lump sum of amount that we were able to put on there. It has been huge. And now we are in a position where, because we have paid off those amounts, we are now able to do $800 on Citi, because before we were doing the $450 for Bank of America. We were also doing the $250 for my mom, which we know we paid that off, and then the original amount that we were paying for Citi was $100. So you add that all together and it becomes $800 that is available for Citibank. And for as long as I have this current job, we have the opportunity to continue to really push that debt reduction process. And that is what our focus will be. We will continue to do the 75%, 25%, because as we can see, the fact that we're still doing 25% to savings means more opportunity or more time for me to find a job once the job does go away. We have no idea when the job is going to go away. So I'm not sure if I wish that I would find something to jump to, or if I would rather the job go away and, within a month or so find something to jump to, or if I would rather that this linger on for a few more months. There's definitely pros and cons to all of those scenarios. I don't know. At this time, we're just going with the flow and taking the opportunities that the scenario or situation presents us, and are trying to use it to our advantage as much as possible. So I think I mentioned, I don't remember in which video, but the last information we had was that we should be working through the end of May. But that doesn't mean everybody on our team will make it through the end of May. There could still be some more layoffs. And B, it doesn't mean that at the end of May the job is going away. It's just they are only willing to commit to the idea that at least some people will be working through the end of May. It could go on into June. It could go on into September, for all I know. But the bottom line is we have been incredibly lucky, because this has lasted far longer than we anticipated. It has given us the opportunity to get that essentially emergency fund in place to hopefully cover the amount of time that I'll be out of a job. I am hoping it does not take me an entire 6 months to find a new job. It has given us the opportunity, as we've talked about, to make finally some significant reductions in our debt. That's not to say we couldn't see progress if the job had been lost and I was working somewhere else. There's always the possibility that I'd find a job that replaces the wages that I'm making now. And if I didn't, we would just have to adjust the budget accordingly, and hopefully there would be at least a little bit of room to, pay debt down. But again, that's something in the future. We're going to have to see where things land with the job situation once the job is gone. I'm really, really hoping that I can find something that pays, if not the same, and of course, most people want more, at least very, very close to what I'm making. So any adjustments to our budget can be minor, and we can still enjoy the blessing of having unallocated amounts of money that we can put to debt besides what we have actually budgeted. But, we don't know. We'll see. We'll have to see where that lands. But again, being in the position that we are, as difficult as it is, as stressful as it is, as untethered and kind of out of control as it is, the situation has allowed us to make progress and to at least bring ourselves back a little bit of a measure of control by allowing us to try to be more prepared. Because frankly, if I had been one of the folks that had lost their job in August, I'm not sure where we would be and what we'd be doing. I don't like to think about that, quite frankly, and I feel terrible for the folks who were in that position, because when I was doing my research, I read something that said something like 60 to 75% of Americans live paycheck to paycheck. And even though we make good money, because of our spending, etc., we were maybe not paycheck to paycheck, but maybe 2 or 3 paychecks down the line, we would be running into trouble if the money went away. And not only that, but I can't exactly remember the statistic. I want to say 1 in 3 Americans have an emergency fund, but it's not enough to cover 3 months of expenses. And 1 in 4 Americans have no emergency fund whatsoever. So when I think about those numbers and I think about all the people that lost their jobs in August, there has to have been folks that fit that criteria. There were probably people who they are the sole income for their household, whether that's just them single or they have children or a family, but they're the only ones that bring in any money. In my team alone, we had 3 people whose spouse also worked for the company. Luckily, they retained their job, the folks on my team, but their spouses didn't. So I can only imagine how many people were out there where both spouses were working for the company, and now they've lost both things of income. And with the delays and things that can come with unemployment, I don't know how they made any. I can't even articulate, because I just don't understand, how did they get forward? How did they move forward? Hopefully they had family and support and were able to weather things, find jobs quickly and stuff like that. I say that even though I do know that at least the last I had heard, which was granted about 3 months ago, there were still 10,000 people who were still unemployed. Again, I guess I can't say I know the accuracy of that number for sure, but that's what was being floated around. So I consider myself incredibly, incredibly lucky for all of the stress and everything that this situation creates. It has also given us the opportunity to try and find ourselves a raft so that we are not drowning. The future, we'll see what that is. I did want to point out that post job, and the 2,700 that we're going to be replacing from what we're savings, we are not including any unemployment in these calculations, and that is purposeful. I do plan on utilizing unemployment, applying for it and hopefully getting it. There shouldn't be any reason why I wouldn't. But because I don't know exactly how much I would get, plus how much will they take out in taxes, plus when will it actually kick in, because we've had some folks who've said, 3 weeks after you apply, because you have the wait period week, you'll get your first paycheck. I've had other people say, yeah, it took them 6 weeks. And I want to say somebody in the comments mentioned when she had to do unemployment, and I don't know if this is recent or a little while ago, it took 12 weeks before she got her first paycheck. That is too much uncertainty for me. So we are not including that in any kind of calculations. And what we'll do is, if we are in a situation where I am going to utilize unemployment, I don't find a job, quickly after I, immediately after I lose this one, or I don't find one and jump from this job to that right away without being laid off, then that money will treat it kind of like our unallocated is treated in our budget currently. We will do we'll either do 75-25, continue to do that to help continue bolstering the cushion that we have and extend the amount of time that I can be out of a job in case it does take longer, or we will just put all of it towards debt. Haven't quite decided that yet. I think that will be a decision that we talk about and make when the situation arises. But that's why I didn't really talk about unemployment with this scenario too much. Well, I hope this was informative. I'm very, very, very pleased and excited about where we are with our progress over these 6 months. It is a little bit bittersweet because I can't help but think, if we had started this a year ago, before there was even a twinkle of the thought that my job was going away, where could we be now? Would we be debt-free except for the house? Possibly. Maybe even have a big chunk of the house paid off, not huge, but a big chunk, because we wouldn't have created as much debt if we'd started this a year ago or 2 years ago or whatever. So the potential of where we could be is, I think, going to be a little bit something that haunts me for a while, but it does not overshadow the fact that we have made significant changes in how we approach our finances, significant changes in how we, how responsible we are trying to be with the money that we have, how much more aware we are of our spending and being careful about it, making intentional moves, saving up, and seeing the progress that we can make when we follow a budget and we put goals out and do things a step at a time. In the moment, it sometimes feels like it takes forever, but when you've then hit that goal, it's such a rush, and it's so great to be able to say, hey, we can do X now because we've met that goal. And now that that goal's gone, we can now move on to this other thing. Paying my mom off was huge. Paying Bank of America off was absolutely huge. The fact that we are really starting to make some progress with the Citi card. That's one of the reasons why I'm kind of like, well, maybe it's a good thing if this does happen to linger until, June, July, August, September. Would we be in a position where we'll be able to pay off Citi? And so now we would only have 2 credit cards to tackle. I don't know. But yeah, It's been a long slog, even though it has only been 6 months. We have made some significant improvements in how we go about dealing with our money, and we've made some significant impacts on our debt. And we're feeling very confident about the future. The only question mark is, once the job goes away, what are we going to be looking at? And most likely, no matter how it goes, we're probably going to have to make some kinds of adjustments one way or another. But I feel like we are in a position now to be able to do that with a sense of knowledge and comfort and all of that. It's not going to be a deer in the headlight situation, because we have new skills, we have new understandings, and we know what we can accomplish. So I hope this, like I said, I hope this was interesting. I hope it was informative. I hope I answered questions that folks have left. Yeah, let me know if there's any questions out there after this. Note those down below. As always, appreciate your comments, your time. Please consider subscribing if you haven't already, and we'll see you in the next one.